G'day folks, welcome back for another episode. Today we've got a jam-packed one out of the European exploration space. So first off the bat, we have got our friends over at Greenroc Mining who've just got the green light on some new land in Greenland, believe it or not. So these folks are London listed, £2.5 million market cap. And they've basically just expanded their mineral exploration license from last year, snagging an extra 114 square kilometres of land around their Amitsoq deposit. Now, this fresh slice of tenure that they've just added is just east of the town of Nanortalik. And this place has basically some historic records hinting at some pretty good graphite grades. So they're looking forward to getting in and exploring that new ground that they've picked up. Second off the list is our friends ASX listed Great Northern Minerals. Now these guys are very junior, 1.5 million Aussie market cap, so very much on the small side of town. But they've just shared some findings from their initial magnetic separation tests on lithium-rich minerals at their Kuusio project located in Finland. Basically, they sifted through the rejects of 3 rock chip samples and ended up with 5 different types of crusher fines. After analysing the fines, they found that the 0.125mm to the 0.25mm fraction looked the most promising. They then ran a magnetic separation on this fraction and managed to recover between 96 and 98% of the lithium in the magnetic concentrates. So basically now the company, what it wants to do, now that it knows that they can recover this lithium, is to apply for an exploration license over the area so they can hopefully kick off a drill program in the area. Now, on to the real news for today, I think, is Discovex. So these guys are a ASX listed again, 6.5 million or 6.6 million Aussie market cap. They're gold explorers, primarily in Australia up until now. And they've launched a bid to take out Latitude Cobalt 66, which is an unlisted Australian public company which owns gold and cobalt projects across Finland. Now, basically, these guys, Latitude 66, had their flagship project. It's called the Kuusamo Schist Belt, the KSB project. And that thing hosts a 7.3 million tonnes at a pretty good grade of 2.74 grams per tonne, plus a credit of 0.08% cobalt, for a total of 650,000 ounces of gold and just shy of 6,000 tonnes of cobalt. Now, the first thing I like to do when I hear that a company is taking out an entire another company is see how many times have these projects changed hands. Is there any problems with them? Just get a background of why they've changed hands. And so I started doing a bit of digging and saw that our friends over at Dragon Mining, which we spoke about last week, they are now Hong Kong listed as of 2018, but previously they were ASX listed. And these guys actually owned the Kuusamo gold project back then. They had ran into a whole bunch of issues with it. Basically, the biggest one being that the government deemed that the municipality of Kuusamo as a core area for tourism. And basically said, whilst quarrying and crushing of soil material and forestry is permitted, mining, processing and refining are not permitted in core area for tourism. So they were fighting against this and basically losing a fair bit of cash whilst doing so, until eventually they ended up selling the project a couple of months later to Kuusamo Gold Oy, which got bought out then by Latitude 66 Cobalt. So it's changed hands a few times in that period. But something that was really interesting was, if we look down to how many ounces were kicking around back in 2013, it was just over 500,000 ounces at 4.1 grams per tonne. If we jump back into the Discovex announcement, they've got an existing JORC resource of 650,000 ounces at a lower grade. So they've added a bit. They've added 150,000 ounces. It's not nothing, but there was already a significant resource base there. So basically, it's changed hands. They've been fighting the government, trying to figure out how to go ahead with this. And in 2019, they ended up deciding that mining can actually go ahead, and it's not going to be considered one of these core tourism areas. So then Latitude 66, obviously with COVID getting thrown into the middle of it, jump in and start drilling the heck out of it. And they get some really good results, which has now come back full circle to where we are today. Now, I understand the project. It's a good project. Cobalt is an important one to get your hands on, because Finland's one of the only places that can process the stuff, and 70% of all cobalt comes out of the Democratic Republic of Congo at present, which isn't considered the most ethical place to mine. And so the European Union really wants some ethically sourced cobalt. So this would be high up on the list. Furthermore, China processes about 80% of all cobalt that globally, and Finland actually has the processing capability for it. So this cobalt's a huge asset for Discovex if they end up getting a hold of it. But Discovex being the buyer came out of left field for me, to be honest, because they've got such a small amount of cash on hand, and they're such a small player. They're only 6.6 million Aussie, and their expertise is in gold in Australia. So anyway, I guess I just don't understand this change in strategy for Discovex, because they've already got some really high-class gold assets in Australia, worth pursuing vigorously, in my opinion. And they've only just barely got the range in the company's budget to drill those out, let alone pull on a whole bunch of new targets in Finland that have seemed to be passed around back and forth a bit. So I guess I don't understand why the focus has shifted so dramatically to an asset that seems semi-risky and more costly to support when it's not in Australia, where the expertise lies. So the synergies aren't too obvious, and they need to raise cash to be able to continue operating. So therefore, they have said that they're going to raise at least $2 million as part of this agreement. So if we jump into here, they raise up to $4 million on a public offer, but they need at least $2 million for this deal to go ahead, to give them enough cash to actually explore the area. There's going to be a board restructure where a couple of guys from the Australian team step down, a couple of guys from Latitude 66 step up, and Capricorn Metals, who are the major shareholder for Discovex, have said that they're going to vote in favour of the transaction. Also, they're going to change their name to Latitude 66 Limited if this thing does go ahead. But basically, Toby Wellman, he's said they're looking forward to acquiring the second largest undeveloped cobalt mineral resource in the European Union, and the company will have exposure to this and hopefully some eventual upside. And Latitude 66 directors have said significant value generation potential for the Discovex assets for Latitude 66. Now, the reason for this is Discovex is paying Latitude 66 in shares, and it is a heck of a lot of shares. So under the new takeover offer, the company will offer, Discovex will offer to Latitude 66 shareholders 0.88 shares in Discovex on a post-consolidated basis for every one Latitude 66 share held. Now, I did a bit of the maths on it, and Discovex shareholders are going to get extremely diluted by this. So basically, ignoring the new funds coming online, so the extra 2 million that needs to be raised, post-consolidation settlement, existing Discovex shareholders will have 33 million shares, whilst Latitude 66 owners will receive 125 million Discovex shares as consideration for their assets. So existing Discovex holders will only own 21% of the enlarged company post-transaction, whilst Latitude 66 investors or vendors will own a whopping 79% of the enlarged company. So if I was a Discovex shareholder right now, I wouldn't be super happy. However, you got to look at this as an opportunity. You got to take a hit sometimes to take on bigger opportunities. However, it seems like a strange one for such a small market capped company. But anyway, if we jump back into the announcement, yeah, there's a bunch of things that need to be accepted before this goes through. Completion of a $2 million public offering. So remembering this company's only a $6.5 million market cap. So that's 30% that they're wanting to raise. They don't have much cash in the bank now, and they're giving away a whole bunch of their shares to Latitude 66. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the share price on this one, considering that they haven't been having a great run over the last couple of years. They've been actually quite a liquid, sitting at all-time lows. So the agreement, the arrangements as a no shop, no talk, and no due diligence restrictions. So basically it means that they have exclusive rights to looking at Latitude Cobalt 66 books at the moment until this deal either goes through or doesn't. So they've got exclusivity basically. And also Discovex can't obviously disclose any of that. So, as I said before, Latitude 66 is an unlisted company, incorporated in 2017, just after Dragon Mining delisted, basically picked up their assets. They acquired the KSB program from Dragon Mining through acquisition on the 8th of November 2016. And they've also got some projects, other projects in their Finnish portfolio. Now, as I said before, the European Union's Critical Raw Material Act requires 10% of its critical raw materials to be mined in the European Union. That includes cobalt. So considering that cobalt doesn't get mined anywhere else in Europe currently, Finland is the only mining country in Europe, it's going to be high on the agenda for EU. Now, what is Discovex getting from Latitude 66? Basically, they're getting a mining concession, 6 granted exploration permits, 26 permit applications, which doesn't mean too much, and 1 exploration reservation. Now, the main one here is that mining concession where the resources are based on. So I'll jump into that, but basically KSB, this is where the mining tenement is. The other 4 are all exploration. Additionally, KSB is just 100 k's away from Rupert Resources' Ikari project, which I spoke about just 2 weeks back, where they've got a massive 58.4 million tonne at 2.2 grams per tonne. So geologically speaking, spitting distance away. So KSB project is the primary asset for Latitude 66 currently, and it consists of the K1, K2 and K3 deposits, which altogether have that 650,000 ounces with 5,800 tonnes of cobalt. So if we look here, KSB, and here's your K1, K2 and K3 in the southwestern area of that mining tenement. So if we jump into cross section here is K1. It's looking like a pretty contiguous ore body, and it's at a great angle to be stoped out. That's looking like it's going to be a good one to mine. If we jump, so the mineral resources is done at a 0.5 gram per tonne cutoff grade, which seems pretty reasonable, especially with the gold price being at 2,200 US, or almost 3,500 Aussie per ounce. So 0.5 is definitely going to fly, especially in an open pit scenario and going into underground. If we jump down to K2, we're looking at much more blobby deposit. So this is probably amenable to a open pit, however with potential for underground in the future. And K3 deposit is looking a lot patchier. So even though they got a lot of drilling through there, this thing's not a contiguous ore body, so it's holding less tons at the moment and would probably be the lowest on the priority list. And here we can see the breakdown. K1 has got the vast majority, 510,000 ounces, whereas K2 and K3 are 105 and 32 respectively. Now, if we scroll all the way down to here, now we start talking about the money side of things. Minimum of 2 million through the issue of 10 million ordinary shares at a proposed price of 0.2, up to a maximum of $4 million, which would be the equivalent of the issue of 20 million shares, to raise that money to be able to go ahead. Basically, there's going to be a huge restructuring, and non-executive chairman Heath is putting in 175,000. The managing director Toby is putting in 35 grand of his own money, and David Morgan is putting in 10 grand of his own money. So they're putting some skin in the game, but it's not massive amounts, to be honest. And they also, like I said before, they intend to appoint Latitude 66 managing director to the DSX board and have Toby step down. Now, there's an unsecured loan facility based behind this. So basically all that means is that Latitude 66 is going to loan 500 grand to Discovex at a interest rate of 15% for this transaction to go through. So regardless of whether it goes through or not, they're going to spend that 500 grand over the next, or up until the 31st of December 2024. And they're going to charge that money out at 15% interest rate, which Discovex will then have to pay back to Latitude 66 if they don't end up buying it. And obviously if they end up buying it, they have to do it regardless. So indicative use of the funds if Discovex get it. So their existing cash reserves, or it's anticipated that their existing cash reserves of 3.5 million. So 3 million cash held by Latitude 66 already, and there's 0.5 million held by Discovex. So they are running pretty skint at the moment. But with this combined 3.5, they're thinking it'll enable 2 years of full operations across the projects. So 700 grand transaction fees, 120 grand capital raising fees. So that's for that 2 million. Then they're looking at spending $1.9 million on these new Finnish deposits, which is going to include diamond, base of till drilling, surface geochem, and geophysics across a bunch of the targets. They're then going to spend 800 grand on their existing Australian gold prospects and another 2 million in admin and working capital. So plenty to unpack here, I think, but I personally don't see the synergies too well for Discovex. I see this as a really good deal for Latitude 66 Cobalt shareholders and not so good for Discovex. But we'll wait to see what they're in a trading halt at the moment. Once they get out of it, it'll be very exciting to see what goes on with Discovex's shares. So cheers for tuning in, and as a disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. It is just my personal opinion about things from a geo's perspective. So please consult a financial advisor if you're going to act on any information. And see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.